She laughed in his face and said, "You have no choice." But what she didn't know was that he had already chosen not to fight back with rage, but to dismantle her entire world in silence, piece by calculated piece. By the time she realized it, the man she thought she owned had become the man she never really knew. Daniel Carter had always believed in the slow, steady kind of love. The kind that grows quietly through years of shared routines and inside jokes, through whispered promises, over dinner and the warm weight of a child asleep in your arms. He had never imagined that love could curdle so completely, so cruelly, until it became something unrecognizable. That the evening it all fell apart wasn't stormy or dramatic. It was quiet, too quiet. The kitchen was bathed in the soft glow of pendant lights, and the clink of wine against glass felt unnervingly cheerful. Julia leaned against the marble counter, swirling her glass like she was already celebrating something. Her voice, when it came, cut the silence like a blade. "Listen to me," she said, her tone dry, eyes sharp. "If you file for divorce, I'll leave you without a penny." Daniel blinked, his hand frozen round the handle of a kitchen drawer. He had opened without thinking. He looked at her, really looked, and realized something that made the air vanish from his lungs. She wasn't crying, she wasn't apologizing, she was smiling. "You'll have to pay for the divorce," she continued, each word a calculated stab. "Then alimony, then child support and custody. You won't even get a shot." He stared at her unblinking. 11 years of marriage, 2 kids, vacations turned sacrifices, late nights working overtime to pay for her schooling, her hobbies, her needs. 11 years now reduced to leverage in a twisted game. "I'll keep having fun with my lover," she added with a sip of wine, as if reading off a shopping list, "and you'll keep paying for everything. That's how this will go." Daniel's jaw clenched. There was a pause in the room, long and cold. "Do you think I'll tolerate and support you in such a lifestyle?" he asked. His voice wasn't raised, but it carried a weight that made the wineglass tremble slightly in her hand. Julia laughed, a short, mocking sound. "You have no other choice." That laugh, it was the final crack in the glass. It wasn't anger that rose in him, or despair. It was clarity. He looked at her, nodded once, and said quietly, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." There was no screaming, no begging, no slammed doors or broken plates. Just Daniel.com, and still, watching his wife raise a toast to her downfall that night. He kissed their kids goodnight, tucked them in gently, and sat down beside her on the couch like nothing had happened. Julia didn't notice the quiet fire behind his eyes. That was her first mistake. The next morning, Daniel took the day off from work. He drove an hour across town to meet with the most sought-after family law attorney in the state, a man known for dismantling narcissists in court and protecting fathers who had been pushed too far. He paid in cash, no digital trail, no red flags. When he laid out the story, the threats, the infidelity, the arrogance, the attorney leaned back in his leather chair, steepled his fingers, and gave a slow nod. "You're not the first," the lawyer said. "But if you follow this plan exactly, she won't know what hit her." The checklist was long. Open a new bank account, secure all financial and legal documents, start building a case for primary custody, document everything, every absence, every lie, every moment. She chose herself over their children. That night, while Julia giggled over her phone, lost in the glow of someone else's attention, Daniel sat in his home office scanning tax records, insurance forms, and school records. She didn't notice. That was her second mistake. Over the following weeks, Daniel became two people. On the outside, he was still the devoted husband, the calm, mature man who didn't fight, who smiled over dinner, who held her hand when friends were around. But behind the curtain, he was building an arsenal. He installed hidden security cameras inside and out, set up voice-activated recording apps, kept a daily journal with dates and times. He began compiling a file that would speak louder than any courtroom speech. Julia grew bolder. She missed bedtimes, school meetings, and skipped dinner without explanation. Daniel said nothing. He just noted it all when she left for one of her so-called work dinners. Daniel tracked her car through a GPS device he had hidden under the frame. She was nowhere near a restaurant. She was parked at a cheap motel on the edge of town. Her boss's car was beside hers. Daniel took photos, saved screenshots of her texts from their shared iCloud. She had never logged out. Every message, every emoji, every lie, he saved them all. She thought he was broken. One night, Julia even said with a smirk, "You're finally being mature about this, accepting it." "Sure, Julia," he said with a small smile. "Whatever you say." That was the night he finished compiling the file. Over 300 pages of evidence, organized, labeled, irrefutable. And that was just the beginning. The sun crept through the blinds the morning Julia was served, casting warm lines across the kitchen tile where she sipped her coffee like it was just another easy Saturday. She had no idea that the world she'd built on secrets, deceit, and smug confidence was seconds away from imploding. Daniel stood behind the curtain in the hallway, holding his coffee cup, heart steady as the knock echoed off the front door. When Julia opened it and the process server asked for her by name, Daniel saw her smirk dissolve like sugar in hot water. Julia Adams, the man asked, polite but firm. Yes, she replied, distracted by her phone. You've been served. She blinked, her hand frozen mid-scroll as he handed over the thick envelope. She flipped through the first few pages and paled. The quiet collapsed around them like a vacuum. Daniel stepped out from behind the curtain. Surprise, he said, evenly. You're divorcing me? She asked, her voice a mix of shock and rising panic. Daniel nodded, sipping his coffee. Based on adultery, emotional abuse, and neglect. Should be an easy case. Her lips parted as if to respond, but no words came. When they finally did, they were sharp. You won't get away with this. I'll still get the kids. You'll still pay alimony. You think this changes anything? Daniel calmly held up a small flash drive. Not with what's on here. The full scope of her nightmare didn't hit until 3 days later. Vanessa, the wife of Julia's lover, called Daniel. Her voice was level, professional, but laced with rage beneath the surface. They met at a quiet cafe downtown. She brought her lawyer. Daniel brought the evidence. Photos, messages, GPS data, audio recordings. Vanessa didn't flinch. Thank you, she said, eyes locked on the file. Now I know how deep it goes. I'll handle my end. Vanessa didn't just file for divorce. She stormed into Julia's office with the same fire Daniel had held back for weeks. She slapped a manila folder down on Julia's desk in front of her co-workers and said loudly, clearly you're sleeping with my husband. You've been using company resources. And you've humiliated my children. Every head in the room turned. No one came to Julia's defense. Her lover stood frozen behind his desk, face drained of color. HR was called. The company suspended, both of them pending a full investigation. Julia's polished image, carefully curated over the years, shattered on the cold office floor. But Daniel wasn't done. 2 weeks before serving the papers, he had moved strategically. All financial assets were already protected. Joint accounts closed, credit cards cancelled. Her car lease revoked. Her name was removed from all insurance. He transferred ownership of the house and every account into legal trusts she couldn't touch. The morning after she was suspended, Julia's salon card declined. So did her grocery payment. She called him in a fury. You're cutting me off. I'm protecting myself. You can speak to your lawyer, Daniel replied. Then hung up. The courtroom was silent when Julia entered for their first hearing. She wore designer heels and a tailored dress, holding her chin high. But the moment Daniel's lawyer began speaking, she started to wilt. The judge was presented with detailed records, weeks of missed school meetings, hours of video footage, testimonials from teachers and babysitters, even audio of Julia mocking Daniel and describing motherhood as too boring. Daniel didn't look at her. He focused only on the judge. The ruling was swift. Daniel was awarded temporary primary custody. Julia was given limited visitation pending further review. She was stunned. The smug mask she had worn for so long finally cracked. The worst blow came when her lover left her. Vanessa filed for divorce and took half of everything. He lost custody of his children, his position at the firm, and his reputation. He tried crawling back to his wife, but she refused. He blocked Julia. Not long after, Julia spiraled. She called Daniel at night, sobbing. He didn't answer. She texted, emailed, and left voicemails. Still, silence. One month later, the custody was finalized. Daniel was granted full legal and physical custody. Julia would only see her children twice a month, supervised at a visitation center. Daniel arrived for the first drop-off wearing a simple jacket. His daughter clung to his side, and his son fiddled with the zipper of his backpack. Julia looked thin, pale, her makeup smeared slightly beneath her eyes. She knelt and opened her arms, but the children hesitated. When she finally whispered, "I made a mistake," Daniel helped his son into his jacket, then looked her dead in the eyes. "No," he said, voice flat. "You made a choice. This is the consequence." Then he walked away. Julia's life continued to unravel. She was let go from her job under the cover of departmental restructuring. Friends distanced themselves. Her family expressed public disappointment. Rumors swirled. Wherever she went, the weight of what she'd done followed. She sent Daniel a handwritten letter for pages of apologies, regret, memories, and vague dreams of reconciliation. She ended it with, "You always saw the best in me. Maybe you still can." He mailed it back. Inside the envelope was a single note. "I did see the best in you. You just made sure I never see it again." Spring had come early that year. Trees lining the street outside Daniel's home swayed with soft green leaves, and sunlight broke through the windows as if the universe was signaling a quiet shift. The house felt different, lighter, still, like a long-held breath had finally been released. Julia's voice no longer echoed in its halls. The tension, the waiting, the pretending, they were all gone. Daniel stood in the hallway, watching his daughter draw on the floor with colored pencils while his son lined up Lego bricks along the staircase. Their laughter filled the home again. It wasn't perfect, he wasn't pretending it was, but it was real. And for the first time in years, it was enough. The court had ruled in his favor: full custody, full ownership of the home, control of the financial assets. Julia had been reduced to a twice-a-month visitor. She missed one supervised session, then another. The court flagged her non-compliance. Parenting classes and counseling were part of her court-ordered requirements, but she skipped them, claiming stress and financial hardship. Her excuses piled up like snow, but no one was shoveling anymore, not even Daniel. He had stopped reacting. He no longer felt the pull to defend himself or fix things for her. Every time an email came in from her address, he read it in silence and hit archive. He had stopped being the version of himself that would break under pressure or twist into knots to protect someone who had never once returned the favor. Then came the mediation request. Julia had switched lawyers again. This one was younger, softer spoken, and suggested she try to resolve things amicably. Daniel knew what that meant. She was losing her grip, and mediation was her attempt to scrape back some control. He agreed not because he believed in second chances, but because he wanted her to sit across the table and see how far she had fallen. The room was sterile. White walls, bland chairs, and a silent mediator seated at the head of the table. Julia arrived 10 minutes early. Her clothes were clean but modest, and her posture didn't carry the same weight it once had. She looked at Daniel at the moment. He walked in. Something was flickering in her expression, hope maybe, or desperation dressed up as it. Daniel didn't speak at first. He let his lawyer outline everything. The missed visitations, the failed classes, the lack of employment, the false accusations she'd made early in the case, each one disproven and documented. Julia barely met his eyes. She stared down at her hands, twisting a silver ring around her finger. "I just want to be part of their lives again," she finally said, her voice small, uncertain. Daniel leaned forward and pulled out a folder. He laid it gently on the table and opened it slowly. Inside were printed messages and mails, texts, financial statements, records she had tried to bury or forget, copies of counseling notices she'd ignored, pictures of school events she had skipped, a single photo of their son on his birthday, blowing out candles alone. "I want to believe you mean that," Daniel said, voice quiet but firm. "But you're still trying to negotiate your way out of accountability. This isn't fair," she whispered. Her eyes glistened, lips trembling. "You were always so calculated, always 10 steps ahead." He shook his head. "You don't get to call me calculated now. Not after everything. I was a husband who trusted you, a father who sacrificed for this family. You laughed in my face. You threatened me. You said I had no choice. This," he tapped the folder, "is what giving someone no choice looks like." Her lawyer shifted in his seat, unsure of whether to interject. Daniel turned to him briefly. "She walks away with her car, her personal belongings, and her name. That's the offer. That's the deal." Julia's jaw tightened. "You want me to disappear?" "No," Daniel said. "I want peace. For me. For the kids. You already chose your path. This is me closing the chapter you started." She didn't sign immediately. There was silence in the room for a long moment. Then, slowly, she picked up the pen and signed her name at the bottom of the agreement. Her signature trembled. When she finished, she looked at Daniel. "I don't even recognize you anymore." He held her gaze. "That's because I stopped letting you define me. It was done. Legal. Final." Daniel stepped outside the building and drew a long breath. The sky was clear. Traffic hummed softly in the distance. He didn't feel joy. He didn't feel victorious. What he felt was steadiness, a calm, powerful stillness that came only after surviving something that should have broken you. Julia moved into a modest apartment on the other side of town. She took a job answering phones at a small firm. Occasionally, she still emailed him short messages, small questions, careful words. He didn't block her. He didn't respond either. Silence was no longer a weapon. It was a boundary. Months passed. The children adjusted, slowly at first, then fully. They stopped asking when she would call. They stopped waking up in tears after weekend visits. They grew into routines with Daniel, movie nights, pancakes on Sundays, school projects and bedtime stories. The house felt like a home again. Not the same home it once was, but something more grounded, more honest than one rainy afternoon. Daniel found an envelope in the mailbox. It was unmarked. Inside was a photo, an old one. He recognized it immediately. Their wedding day, Julia's hand in his, the wind catching her veil, the moment frozen in time. Behind the photo was a note. "You did see the best in me. I'm sorry I couldn't protect it." Daniel stared at the message for a long time. He sat down on the porch, rain falling in soft rhythms around him, and let the past rest where it belonged, in memory, not in his hands. He didn't write back. He didn't rage. He didn't grieve. He simply placed the photo back in the envelope, sealed it, and dropped it into the fire pit. Later that evening, he watched the flames eat away the corners. The paper curled inward, shrinking to ash, until there was nothing left but smoke trailing into the night sky. That chapter was over. The final move wasn't revenge. It wasn't silence. It wasn't even winning. It was moving on. Moral and life lesson of her final mistake. Betrayal may shatter trust, but true strength lies in how you rise from the ruins, not with noise but with purpose. Never underestimate the quiet ones. The most powerful revenge is not destruction, but rebuilding your life so completely that those who tried to break you are forced to watch you thrive without them. Dignity, patience, and truth will always outlast deception and arrogance.